First, I am just so grateful for your invitation to talk to you again about water. It's so fitting. I don't know if Lucas realized, but he chose the same reading from Rabindranath Tagore as I did last time I was here. And I thought, oh, that's so beautiful, but I don't know if I should use it again. So you solved that for me. And then I came across the affirmation this morning when I was helping my husband looking for something in the hymnal. I was like, oh, that's beautiful too. Why didn't I think to use that? Okay. So we're on the same page. And that's a beautiful feeling. I'm grateful for that. So I'm grateful to renew this connection to you and learn more about what you have all been up to for the last 4 years. Thankfully, with the education I received as your intern almost 10 years ago, I'm able to put some of it to service in the Sonora congregation, which has several former Livermore members. Kathy reminded me that Cheryl and Charlie Giles have been members in the Livermore Church. I don't know if some of you remember Shell Oldham, Marilyn Graham, Suzanne Thomas. When one of us walks into a new place and sees a familiar face, it raises spirits. Like it's really hard to create those possibilities in other ways. So I encouraged you to know more about where your water comes from and where it goes when it leaves your house. That was 4 years ago. In the summer, after I spoke to you, I took up backpacking. And as I made my way through the High Sierra between Yosemite and Mount Whitney, I couldn't help marveling at the rushing rivers, the occasional glaciers, and the sparkling lakes that seemed like they were around every bend. I came home with the distinct impression that the mountains in California act like a giant sponge, soaking up water as it falls on its way east, and then releasing that water in the spring, snowmelt. There's nothing quite like picturing the headwaters of the San Joaquin River as I turn on my faucet at home when I'm making a cup of tea. Seeing a dripping glacier or dangling my feet to refresh them before pushing on, taking a long cold drink while laboring over a pass definitely raised my consciousness and connection to water, which was something I encouraged you guys to do 4 years ago. But more than just raising consciousness, my gratitude was deepened for the lupins and the redwood trees, for the bears and the deer that we share this precious resource with. As John Muir said, a tree takes sunshine and grows. Our souls take beauty, strive, and grow. He also said, people who come here to Yosemite ought to abandon and forget all that is called business and duty. They should forget their individual existences. They should forget they are born. They should, as nearly as possible, live the life of a particle of dust in the wind or a withered leaf in a whirlpool. They should become like thirsty sponges to imbibe without rule. It is blessed to lean fully into nature and trustingly on it, to experience the infinite tenderness and power of her love. Maybe John Muir would say, I grew my soul, leaned into trusting nature, and discovered an infinite tenderness and love that we are all connected to that summer, hiking the John Muir Trail. As I return again and again to nature, I have a widening fondness for all the little tiny particularities in nature, like the music of a burbling mountain stream, or the popping purple of lupins found in a new place that mirrors that tenderness I felt as I gazed upon the world clad in seamless beauty, as Muir would say. As my consciousness grew from being in nature, along with reading John Muir's writings, so too not only my soul, but my heart sings with that ecstatic joy. Have you found a place, a plot of land that's like that for you? Anybody? All right. I hope you talk to each other about it afterward, because some people need to hear from you. This fall, when the water from the tap was not that pristine quality we've all grown accustomed to, and smelled and tasted kind of off, did you have that experience? Some of you did. I did. Or when I saw the warning signs at Lake Chabot, where I walk regularly, that there's toxic algae growing in the water, so don't let your dogs drink it. My concern about that connection and tenderness that I received from nature was piqued. I don't know exactly when it was a few years ago, when I first plucked the pink bucket out of my garage and put it in the extra sink in the kitchen that we rarely use. My dryland heart figured that while waiting to do something more progressive with our gray water, we could at least catch the water that we wash vegetables with and use it again before sending it down the drain. We could soak pans or run the garbage disposal with it. And that bucket became a lifeline for the maple tree and the lemon tree that I didn't want to lose this year in the drought. But the bucket also reminds me to be grateful and sparing with the water that I use at home. To think of its source all the way up there in the mountains and all the beings along the way that I share it with. The first summer when I was backpacking, I'm embarrassed to admit that I made a really ugly mistake. I washed my hair in the river. And even though I used that Dr. Bronner's soap, which is supposed to be biodegradable, I saw that it created this huge sudsy mess downstream. I didn't start out leaving no trace, but I soon began to understand what it means to experience the outdoors in its pristine, in all its pristineness. Like no one has seen it before you come upon it. And so I began to bring along some Ziploc bags to carry water away from the water source and do washing near a plant or tree that might need it. I began to heed the leave no trace suggestions, which are easy to find on the internet. Sometimes when I just go out to take a walk, I carry a bag for trash and pick up my favorite or even a new path. And if I don't use soap when I'm in the wilderness, I can just scrape out the pan that I've been eating from and drink the water and wipe it with a towel and forego any of the sudsy mess most of the time. It's so much easier to raise consciousness when you see the effect that you have directly and are fed by the stillness in nature that can carry you. When thinking about how your consciousness is raising, it's kind of helpful to think about a longer time period. Take the 4 years since I last spoke about water to you. Think back to what you were doing then and changes you have made since then. That was right before the drought hit, before we realized that we weren't going to have super snowy winters. In that way, you can evaluate how you want to be in relationship with water and with our natural environment. I hope to hear more ways that you care for our natural world in the forum a little bit later. Now, there's a saying that hiking the John Muir Trail from Yosemite to Mount Whitney is the gateway drug to long-distance backpacking. And for me, that was surely the case. I kept meeting these Pacific Crest Trail or PCT hikers, and slowly the desire to connect with more of California's wilderness took shape. As many of you know, I grew up in Los Alamos, and my heart and spirit are imprinted with the soaring views of mountains and the desert dryness-enabled vistas that seem to go on to infinity. And while hiking in the desert is not the kind of fun that a lot of people seek out, I was curious to see if I could find a connection with the desert landscape in Southern California. As I planned my trip around how far I could go without water, how much water I thought I could carry in the water sources, I realized that I had a certain amount in common with the people I had met through the Community Water Center in Visalia. Those people struggled daily with just having sufficient water for their human needs. They struggled not only with sufficiency, but with quality. It was just a short leap to realize that I could raise consciousness on the trail with hikers about water issues in California and write a blog and tell the water stories that I encountered for those not on the trail. At the same time, raising money for water justice efforts by asking people to pledge by the mile for distribution of the film Thirsty for Justice, which you guys will be seeing in February. The blog I wrote is on the UUJMCA.com website, and it has all the stories listed if you're curious to find out more. I enjoyed telling hikers from as far away as New Zealand, Poland, and Germany about water issues in California and helping them understand some of what the people downstream were encountering. I realized that when you're looking to make a difference in the area of water justice in California, we have a lot of options and a lot of ways to get involved. I'm most likely to engage with the people who love the outdoors. Maybe because I unwittingly started with John Muir's approach that we heard in the reading. For me, the little plot of land that I connected first to in California, partly because I'm not really much of a gardener, was a tree branch that I could sit on next to Lake Chabot and watch the sunlight reflect off the water and light up the understory of the trees in the morning. As I sat there alone, day after day, month after month, cooling my head, calming my soul, letting those cares drop off like autumn leaves, I noticed how the reeds nearby would attract the coots in springtime. I noticed how the heron would watch me for several minutes and then gracefully flap off to a more protected hiding place. And it made me curious about the hills around me and the mountains beyond and how different or similar they were to the New Mexico mountains where I knew the flora and fauna better. I started out hiking with friends, and I saw their connection and delight in nature grow. And I realized for me, that's the most fun and natural way that I can make a difference, is just getting people to come out and see what we find together. And so I wonder, what is it about water or our natural world or people struggling for water sufficiency that tugs at your heart and makes you feel like you want to be engaged today? I recently met Sonya Sulkowski, who works for the Environmental Justice Coalition for Water. She told me about how she had to help her grandparents in Fiji, whose livelihoods depend on the ocean, to move because their house was being inundated by sea level rise. She lives in the North Bay here and is able to connect her story to others seeking justice, both in her personal and professional lives. There are many people who live near sources of contamination of our groundwater in California. And some of them you will understand better and meet as you develop ties to the community water center. If you have been ill because of food or water contamination, certainly I would think that story might resonate with your soul. A source of water contamination that is proliferating is gas development, which a lot of fracking is involved with. You may already know that a huge amount of water is needed for injection deep into the earth to get the gas out, and then that water is contaminated and unable to be cleaned. And then there is the drought, which has made many of us nervous, including politicians. When water rationing is in effect, pet projects always get called up for another review. Jerry Brown's giant twin tunnels that bypass the delta and take water out of the estuary that is the San Francisco Bay is one of those projects. Local people have organized around saving the delta, networking fishermen, farmers, and recreation. Another politician involved in water issues is Senator Feinstein. The Sacred Land Film Project is keeping an eye on Senator Feinstein's interest in creating 2 new dams, one in the Sites Canyon and another in Temperance Flats. Senator Feinstein is also a proponent of raising Shasta Dam, despite the fact that the Winnemem-Wintu tribe's last remaining sacred sites would be inundated and underwater if it were to fill. Imagine if one of those places that has nurtured and healed you, not to mention generations of your ancestors, was to be destroyed. If that story resonates for you, I encourage you to find out more about how to work with like-minded people. Some of us, in the past couple of years, I imagine, conserved water and made improvements to our properties with the nervousness that we had about the water situation. Imagine if we were to catch more rainwater here in the Bay Area, use more gray water for our gardens, and contemplate smaller, more local solutions rather than giant, expensive projects. Just as rooftop solar panels took existing resources and repurposed them, as in a roof that wasn't doing anything, that kind of highly distributed repurposing might be a way to think about our water needs and use. If I could live on 6 liters of water a day with 1 day of extra washing a week for my clothes and body, how much less water might we all use as a society if we tried? In both the tiny particularities that we encounter when we're aiming to find a stillness and calm ourselves and reconnect, as well as opening our hearts to the wide universe from a mountaintop, our Blue Boat home needs us to lean into wonder, find kindred souls to make our way together, and use our resources wisely.